Hi there, and welcome to the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Information Schools Continuing Education course, Introduction to Digitization Projects. This is the week one lecture for this course. Each week we're going to have a lecture kind of like this one. We'll have a few readings or some things to look at or watch, a discussion question, and an assignment. You should expect to spend about 2 to 3 weeks per week on this course. And there's lots of other information in the syllabus, so check that out for more info about how the course is going to proceed. This week, though, we're going to be doing just a quick introduction to some basic concepts and more details coming in the future weeks. This week, we're going to talk about digitization projects and what digitization projects are and what they aren't, why digitization is an important tool for preservation and access, some things to keep in mind when considering digitization projects, a super quick overview of the process just to give you an idea of what the next 7 weeks are going to look like, and then this week's assignment, which will lead you into the project plan you're going to be completing for the semester. So let's get started. First off, as you've seen on the syllabus and when you registered for the class, I'm your instructor. My name is Kristen Whitson. I'm a very proud graduate of this very program at the iSchool, along with some of you that I see on the roster for the class, even some former classmates. So hi, it's nice to have you all here. These days I work for an organization called WILS, Wisconsin Library Services, where I'm basically a library and archives related project manager for a bunch of different projects around Wisconsin. Consortia of libraries and other organizations hire WILS to project manage for them, and each of us who works there is assigned to different projects based on our expertise. I'm assigned about half the time to a project called Recollection Wisconsin, which is a central access point for about 400 digital collections from around the state, and the source of a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about and sharing throughout this course as well. The rest of the time I work on various things like cultural heritage projects with Wisconsin's Native Nations, archives consulting, grant projects that have to do with digitization, and so on. This is my first time teaching for the iSchool, so I'm super glad to be here and excited to meet all of you. So first of all, what is a digitization project? This thing that we're going to be talking about for this week and 7 more weeks. At its core, a digitization project involves converting physical, analog materials into digital formats. This process is central to preserving and providing access to items that exist in a non-digital state, whether they're historical documents, photographs, artwork, or audiovisual materials like cassette tapes or film reels. When we talk about digitization, we're primarily referring to the conversion of 2D, two-dimensional items, such as photographs, letters, manuscripts, or maps, converting those into digital images that can be viewed on a computer screen. But digitization isn't just limited to flat two-dimensional objects. It can also encompass 3D objects, where advanced photography and scanning techniques can allow us to create digital representations of items like sculptures, artifacts, or any physical object with depth. And in addition to 2D and 3D materials, digitization can also include audiovisual materials or AV materials. This might involve converting old VHS tapes, cassette recordings, or reel-to-reel films into digital video or audio files. And by doing that, we not only preserve the content, but we make it easier and more accessible to share with others. It's important to note that when we're talking about digitization, we're not referring to born digital materials, which are items that were created in a digital format from the outset, like a digital photograph taken from a smartphone or an email. Those are super important projects and workflows, but just not the focus of what we're doing in this course, and that's not what digitization means. Instead, digitization projects focus on materials that began their existence in a physical or analog form and require a deliberate process to bring them into the digital realm. I'm going to give you a few examples of what some digitization projects might be, and I encourage you to spend some time looking up various examples of these types of digital collections, and there's a bunch of them in the list of readings for this week. This week's readings really are just a lot of different examples of digital collections to look at, so take some time to look at those. A public library archive might be the situation that several of you are in. Let's say a town's public library undertakes a project to digitize a collection of local newspapers, which would date back to the 19th century, for instance. The goal is to preserve those fragile papers and make them available online for researchers and community members interested in local history. Another example might be a family photo archive, something else you might want to consider choosing for your course-long project. Let's say there's a family that decides to digitize their collection of old family photos, some of which might be over 100 years old. They use a high-resolution scanner to create digital copies of the photographs and organize them into an online album. In a university setting, a university library might embark on a project to digitize a collection of, for instance, medieval manuscripts. These would be rare and delicate documents, so they would be carefully scanned and the digital images made available through the library's digital collections portal. UW-Madison has some examples of items just like that. Let's say a museum has an artifact collection, 3D digital models of, they want to create 3D digital models of an artifact collection, let's just say ancient pottery. Using 3D scanning technology, the museum can create detailed digital replicas of the pottery, which are then made available in an online exhibit. And I should say that that's not something we're going to cover a lot in this particular course. We're going to touch on it a tiny bit, but as with many other types of technology, I'm just going to give you the resources to learn what you don't know already and pursue it if that's something that fits for your role or a project that you want to work on. Audiovisual preservation is another aspect of these types of digitization projects. Let's say there's a nonprofit organization focused on civil rights history, and they decide to digitize a collection of oral history interviews, which were originally recorded on cassette tapes. The tapes are converted to digital audio files and then supplemented with transcripts. That's a digitization project. And finally, another example is government records. Let's say a city government decides to digitize decades of city council meeting minutes and public records to improve accessibility and transparency. They might decide to scan the records and then index and make accessible the resulting digital files for easy searching. So these are just a few examples that demonstrate the wide range of materials that can be digitized and the different kinds of goals of digitization projects, from preserving family history to making rare historical documents accessible to a global audience. So why are we bothering to do this? Why are we doing all of this work for digitization projects? Well, digitization can play a really crucial role in preserving and providing access to archival materials. And let's go over just a few reasons why that is: preservation, accessibility, and cultural heritage. First and foremost, digitization can be, and I want to emphasize, can be, not guaranteed to be, we'll talk about this later, digitization can be a powerful tool for preservation. Many of the physical materials that we value, whether they're old photographs, documents, tapes, or artifacts, are inherently physically fragile. Over time, these items can deteriorate due to environmental factors like humidity, light exposure, and constant handling. So for example, paper can become brittle, photographs can fade, and audiovisual materials like tapes can degrade. So digitizing those materials creates a digital copy that can be stored and preserved. And even if the original item is lost, damaged, or destroyed, the digital version could be one that remains intact. Sidebar, with a lot of work in digital preservation, which again we're going to talk about in a future week. This is especially important for rare or unique items that can't be replaced. Creating a digital surrogate is not a replacement for physical preservation procedures, and digitization is not preservation, but utilizing a digital copy for research purposes can help prolong the life of a physical item. Beyond preservation, digitization can significantly enhance accessibility. Physical materials, by their nature, are often difficult to access. They might be housed in a single location, available only during certain hours, or require special permission to view. And limiting that kind of access can be a barrier to researchers, students, and the general public. Digitization can break down those barriers. Once the materials are digitized, they can be shared widely and accessed from anywhere in the world. A researcher in another country might be able to view a digital collection without having to travel. This type of broad accessibility supports not only education and research, but it can democratize access to information, making it available to anyone with an internet connection. Finally, digitization can play a vital role in preserving and sharing cultural heritage, especially within local communities. Cultural heritage encompasses the traditions, stories, and artifacts that define a community's identity. And these materials are often at risk of being forgotten as older generations pass away and physical items deteriorate. So through digitization, communities can preserve their cultural heritage in a way that is both permanent and shareable. So oral histories, traditional music, and historical artifacts can be digitized and made available to future generations. Digitization is a tool, just one of many, in our efforts to preserve fragile materials. So by embracing digitization, we can help ensure that valuable knowledge, history, and traditions contained within these materials are preserved for future generations to study, learn from, and enjoy. So here's a few things I want to mention here at the outset of our course, and we're going to go into detail on these throughout the course of the semester, but I want you to keep them in mind from the beginning. So first of all, just because you can put something online doesn't necessarily mean that you should. We're going to talk about this a ton throughout the next 7 weeks. There are a lot of privacy and ethical considerations that we'll discuss, including not just thinking about past harmful content, but also culturally sensitive content, content including minors, and so on. And this is something I'm going to prompt you to consider about the hypothetical project you're designing in this course. Next, just because you can digitize something doesn't necessarily mean that you should put it online. There are two different steps. Digitizing something and putting it online, two different things, and they're treated differently by copyright protections. So keep in mind that it is valid to digitize a collection and only have it available for limited or on-site use. As I mentioned, I think several times in the last slide, digitization alone is not preservation. Digital preservation, quote unquote, is a subdiscipline in this field that works to make digital items available and accessible for many years to come. But digital preservation can be even more work than physical preservation. Just digitizing something does not mean that the digital surrogate will be accessible or uncorrupted forever. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that you can digitize physical items to save space and then discard the originals, at least in most cases. And finally, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Truly, there are high-level, technically superior ways to digitize archival materials, and there are definitely times and places for that kind of intense attention to the digitization process. What we're talking about in this course is introducing those who may have never done a digitization project, who are just getting started. We're introducing those kinds of folks to the possibilities of digitization. And those possibilities don't necessarily require a lot of experience or fancy technology. Doing some digitization is better than doing no digitization. Getting the material online and accessible with minimal metadata is better than spending years in writing really extensive metadata before getting anything online. In my daily work with small historical societies and libraries, I find that folks are, more often than not, pretty intimidated by the processes and the overwhelming amount of information available on how to do this work. My role there and in this class is to empower them and you to just start. Just start and enjoy what you are able to do, and that's what we're going to do in this course. So let me give you just a super quick overview of what a digitization project process looks like. Each of these steps is going to make up a topic for each of our weeks for the course going forward. And I also want to mention that these can be iterative, meaning that you might have to do one step a few times, go backwards or leap forwards. There's really no wrong way to do this, but this is a pretty good recommended workflow. So the digitization project process includes several key steps to ensure successful, ethical, and sustainable projects. So first, plan and prioritize by identifying the materials you want to digitize based on their value, condition, and accessibility needs. The planning step coming first is pretty important and will make the rest of your project proceed more successfully. Then obtain both copyright and ethical permissions to ensure that you have the legal and cultural rights to digitize and share materials. Next, move on to the actual digitization process, where you digitize the materials through scanning or reformatting them, ensuring high-quality digital files. Once digitized, you'll describe those materials by creating accurate and detailed metadata, which will help the users understand and find materials. With metadata in place, you can now share the digitized items through online platforms or repositories, making them accessible to your intended audience. It's also essential to focus on long-term sustainability here, so then you'll store and make a plan for maintaining that storage for the digital files to ensure their preservation through regular backups and digital preservation strategies. And then finally, you'll evaluate the project to determine if it met its goals, whether in terms of preservation, accessibility, or community engagement, and assess areas for improvement. So each of these steps are critical for a well-rounded, successful digitization initiative. So that's really it for the content for this week. Let me tell you just a little bit about your assignment this first week. So for the next 7 weeks of this course, you're going to do each of those steps, the plan and prioritize, obtain permission, digitize, describe, etc. You're going to do each of those steps for an actual digitization project. So for this first week, I'd like you to choose a collection to digitize. It can be real, it can be imagined, you can make one up if you'd like, but I will tell you that you'll have more practical applications if this is an actual digital collection that you would like to digitize in your job or in your family. Your final product will be an actionable project plan for this actual collection. So let me know, send me an email or a message through Canvas if you'd like some help thinking of a collection, or if you want some food for thought about what you might be able to use in your professional or personal life. And the assignment is going to be to submit a paragraph describing what you know of or have imagined about the collection itself. So you can find more details about that in the Canvas assignment. And thanks for being here this first week. I'm looking forward to the rest of the course with you. Feel free to shoot me an email with questions. Thanks.